We got a high-powered defense, big names all across the board. And we have crab cakes,
That's the most important part. Hello, everybody. I'm Ben Super. This is Chad Cummings. We are the Flock Squawk podcast. It is March 30th, 2022. And the big swings in free agency, it seems things have sort of calmed down in the NFL landscape. There's still some question marks about where guys are going. There's some quarterback controversy, but we in the Ravens flock and in the Flock Squawk community, we've got to be feeling pretty excited about the guy that we just re-signed this week. I'm here with Chad. Chad, how are you doing, sir?
I am doing great, Benjamin Super.
On it,
Glad to be talking football with you today.
me too. Well, and I'm going to start with a little lacrosse. So you've got a lot of like Ravens gear in the background, which I really appreciate because today I've been rocking the Maryland gear because the men's lacrosse team, Chad, we are just ravaging everywhere. The number one team in the country. We're just beating ass. Every week I look at lacrosse scores, and it's the University of Maryland men's team has just whooped someone else's ass. It's a good time.
Anything lacrosse, Maryland is relevant in a Ravens podcast, I believe.
I think so too. It shows people that, hey, we've got outside interests. And if I'm going to shout my team out, they're the number one team in the country. All right, let's get back to the Ravens. Enough about the UMD talk. Project Pat. We were talking about him not being re-signed, and you had me pretty much convinced, man. I was like, damn. I was like, I hope they get a deal done for him. And you were like, yeah, but if we're being real, man, like Lamar's deal's got to get done. He's going to probably want more money. He's probably going to want to take a chance somewhere else. And I'm like, fuck, Chad. You kind of like, you brought a rain cloud over me. And we found out earlier this week that is not going to be the case. He's back for 3 years. I'm stoked. I think everyone's stoked that he's back. He's a fan favorite. He's been to 3 Pro Bowls already. NFL teams are kind of looking for guys who have that positionless title to them, right? So you can play a lot of different positions. And there's a lot of things that schematically coaches can do with type players like that. I think of like for the Cardinals, Isaiah Simmons. They call him a positionless player. Is he a safety? Is he a corner? We don't know. Is he a linebacker? Well, maybe in some schemes. But Pat Ricard has been that for us. Undrafted guy out of Maine. The reason I wanted us to keep him was because he had a defined role in our offense. And he does it better than a vast majority of other players who would be put in his position. So I want to get your thoughts on the deal. Like, you have to love this. I mean, he's just a Raven, kind of like a lunch pail kind of guy, right? A guy you'd want to have around in your locker room.
100%. Yeah, he is huge in our offense and the way we run our offense with multiple tight ends, multiple running backs, multiple fullbacks, because we are a run-happy team. And he is like a tight end, fullback, running back, extra offensive line, hybrid type of guy that also catches the ball. That game against the Vikings, we had a drive where he caught the ball like 3 or 4 times, and he ended up scoring the touchdown. I think he's the only one that touched the ball in that drive, which was crazy. I mean, it speaks volumes to his versatility and his value in the type of offense we run. Here's the breakdown: a 3-year deal worth $11.25 million. With $3.5 million sign bonus, $2 million this year, $3.9 next year, and then in 2024 it's $5.1. So it's backloaded. Yeah, I mean, when it came to our postseason talk, and I thought he was going to be gone, was that we brought back Ben Mason, the tight end fullback hybrid that we drafted from Michigan last year. He got cut from the team originally, and we were hoping to bring him back on a practice squad, but the Patriots snatched him up, and he went to the Patriots over us. And at the end of the year, he got cut, I guess, and he decided to come back. Ravens decided to bring him back. So when I saw that news, I was like, dang, they're anticipating not having Patrick Ricard. That's kind of what went through my mind. And I saw a lot of reports leading up to free agency that he was trying to get some tight end money because the percentage of snaps that he lined up as tight end was pretty high in his snap count. So he was trying to use that to get some tight end money. But I guess it didn't work out. And he, came back to, and lucky for us, he came back to us. So I'm happy about it for sure.
That's interesting. So he tried to leverage himself because we were just talking, he's like a positionless player. He was trying to leverage himself in like the highest like pay bracket that he could find for his position. Because like if it was between defensive lineman, offensive lineman, tight end, fullback, right? Like out of those four, you'd probably want the tight end money, because it's a little. So he tried to leverage that to try and get a deal. I think that's kind of funny, like because with these positionless players, it's going to come to a point where you're going to have more and more of them in the league. It makes you wonder if when they go in for salary negotiations, it's like, okay, well, I'm this for your team, so I should be getting paid. These guys are getting made. Bless you. I don't know. That was just interesting. But so that was the sticking point. That was why they couldn't find a number to agree on. $5 million in 3 years is not like a huge hit to your cap.
No, yeah, I think going into free agency, that was just the reports going around that he was looking for tight end money potentially because he was lining up as tight end most of his snaps. So he had an argument, and people were reporting that he might leverage that to get a better contract somewhere. I guess it didn't work out.
And I think if you watch Ravens games, the fact that he tried to say that he was a tight end, it's sort of funny because like everyone knows that he's basically a fullback, right? We use him in run blocking and all this other stuff. It kind of gave me hope when Eric Hutchinson left, because when Eric Hutchinson left, I was like, okay, so they used him in blocking schemes as well. It was kind of an argument for Pat Ricard. Like, okay, well, if Eric Hutchinson is gone, Pat Ricard is still the best one on our team that can establish a run game for us through his blocking. And it's like, it gives you more incentive to keep him. It was interesting when the first reports initially came out, they didn't include a dollar amount. So I'm glad you're on top of that, because a lot of the things when the story first broke was just like, oh, it's a 3-year deal, but they wouldn't break down the specifics of it. I don't know whether it's because it's not worth a lot of money. That might be it. Or is it like they're trying, maybe the Ravens are making a concerted effort to kind of keep these numbers under wraps a little bit more since Lamar hasn't signed his contract yet. I don't know. It was just strange. But now that the numbers are out, it's not like that seems to change that calculus.
I think these under the radar signings for players that aren't big names, there's no one really pushing for the numbers as much. So I think they just trickle down later in the week or so, because these numbers didn't come out right away, and I think it's a product of that. I don't think it's any like the Ravens are trying to not show anything.
Right.
I think it's just the supply and demand of info for less known players. People probably didn't really care enough to dig deep enough.
And fans will dissect it, but the media at large isn't really going to do it. They'll announce that a deal was done. So basically with the numbers that you're saying, like the contract averages about like $4 million per year with incentives. So he would be like the second highest fullback in the league outside of Juice over there in San Francisco, also a former Raven of ours. And he was on the field for 57% of the Ravens' offensive snaps last season. Huge part of our offense. I think if he's gone, I definitely would have missed him, and I would have looked for a replacement. You know what I mean? Because what he provides, the offense is pretty crucial, and you can put him anywhere. And I think there's going to be a premium on those kind of guys going forward, because the schemes in football only get more complicated, and having guys like that in there, it just helps what you can do. So
exactly, especially when you have a very talented running offense quarterback, someone like him is very important.
Yeah.
For the type of scheme we run.
Yeah, I agree. So we give it trade.
Very
this
good.
Is good. This is a sign.
Very good sign.
Yeah, I agree. I love that he's back in the building. John Harbaugh picks up 3 years. So they have him locked up until 2025. He's the third longest tenured coach in the NFL with a specific team. The only two that have played with their teams longer, coached their teams longer, have been Bill Belichick and Mike Tomlin. So that sort of continues that trend. There were some comments made by Steve Biscotti this week, basically saying, like, yeah, it's nice to not have to worry about a head coach. It's obvious that we're going to re-sign him. What do you make of this? I mean, this is just sort of, it seems like with all the criticism that's leveled at the Ravens, this year kind of, it really heightened with with his decision-making, like going for 2-point conversions and stuff like that. Are you surprised by the contract extension? Do you think it needed to be done? And is it something? I think it had to be done. Really, he's the one steering this Lamar train for the most part, right?
Yeah, I wasn't surprised at all. I mean, when you have a Super Bowl winning coach leading your team, who the players rally around and love, you need to keep them in a building. The biggest, I mean, every year you see in the off season, the teams that are struggling. They're struggling to find a coach and they're struggling to find a QB. And when you have the coach, you want to keep him. And he was on his last year of his contract, so get the extension done and keep your head coach, man. Your Super Bowl winning head coach. 15 years as the Ravens head coach is the third largest tenure among active guys right now. He's the winningest coach in our young history. .607 win percentage, which ranks number 6 among active coaches. He has had 9 playoff berths. He won Coach of the Year in 2019. And, of course, he won the Super Bowl in 2012. Super Bowl head coach. So we wanted to keep Harbs, man. It's going to be a good window for us with Lamar playing on his last year, and then, signing his extension next year. That gives us at least 3 more years with Lamar and John Harbaugh together.
John Harbaugh is like, he's been in the league for 15 years, and he could easily coach for another 15. Like, I know that he's up there in age, but he doesn't look like it at all. He's over there on the sidelines yelling. He seems engaged in what's going on with the game. Players love him. I mean, I'm going to go back to this a lot, but listening to Lamar Jackson on The Shop with LeBron, and LeBron straight up asked him, he's like, so how is Jim Harbaugh? Because he seems awesome. Everything that LeBron had heard about him, he was like, yeah, that seems like a guy I would want to play with. And Lamar just waxed poetic about him and the kind of environment that he brings to this team. We saw Justin Houston was mic'd up, I think during a practice, or no, it might have been a game or a preseason game. And he was saying, yeah, man, Baltimore is different. It's way different than any other place I've ever been at. He's like, it's a lot more veteran friendly, and it's very, it's like awesome to come to work every day. And John Harbaugh, I think, is the one who sets that tone. And he's got the clout to back it up. He's a Super Bowl champion. You're really going to get rid of a Super Bowl champion head coach? I mean, who's had tenure with the team at this point? It was an obvious extension. And listen, he made some questionable calls last year with some of these 2-point conversions, but he was also put in a lot of very difficult positions. And with Lamar as a quarterback, he was able to navigate that to an 8-3 record. And I know he lost. We went 0-6 the rest of the stretch. I get it. But the fact that we even got to that point, and it was funny because when we got to that point, Chad, in the pod, both of us were like, yeah, I mean, whatever happens, happens. And they ended up, the worst case scenario ended up happening and crashing out. But he deserves a lot of credit for the start of the season that we had.
We went 8-3 with the injuries that we had in the beginning of the season. And unfortunately, the injuries just only got worse and worse as the season went along. And when you lose your starting quarterback, you go 0-6. What are you going to do?
Right. Yeah, so I'm glad he got extended. I think it's a good thing. 3 more years of Harbaugh in Baltimore. Gosh, it must drive his brother crazy. Probably doesn't. You know what I mean? But like considering how those two names get, swapped around, it's like everyone has all this hype for Jim and no one ever thinks about John. And it's like that's because John's locked up. He's got a gig. He doesn't need to go anywhere. Other comments, though, that were made by Steve Biscotti, too. He's kind of an interesting owner in the sense that he doesn't really go out to the national media too much. He's a guy who we kind of don't really hear about him too much until the offseason comes around. He's not like Robert Kraft or Jerry Jones, where they're every single move is dissected and what they do. But he had some interesting comments about the Lamar Jackson contract stuff. I have it up. This is by Jamison Hensley from ESPN. Basically, the article talked about Deshaun Watson's contract and how going forward, Lamar's contract is going to have to be put in a similar light. And some of the things that he said was very interesting. Here's a direct quote. I'm trying to answer that when I had a reaction to it. And it's like, damn, I wish they hadn't guaranteed the whole contract, talking about the Deshaun Watson stuff. We were talking about that the last podcast because it really, with how this trend is going to go, Steve Biscotti and other owners are worried about it because they're not going to be able to have the wiggle room to negotiate other contracts on the team. So, this is obviously a trend that's going to continue. And it's proof that the Deshaun Watson stuff did affect the thinking on Lamar Jackson's deal. He said that, and then he said some other stuff like, it doesn't necessarily mean that we have to play that game, meaning keeping salaries increasing for quarterbacks. We shall see. If I was bogged down in negotiations with Lamar, then maybe I would have a quicker reaction to that news. What did you make? So there's been a lot of talk about like the Ravens being cheap and not spending what they need to for players, and that's why we never get the guys we need. That quote to me is like, we don't have to continue this like arms race for quarterbacks, right? Like we can give him an offer that we think is competitive, but to me, Chad, it seems like if they do that, they've got a good chance of losing Lamar Jackson. Like, why would Lamar Jackson agree to get paid less than a guy like Deshaun Watson when he's accomplished more than Deshaun Watson has in the league up to this point? Like, what do you make of that? It's just kind of an interesting, it's an interesting quote from the owner.
Yeah, well, so what, in my eyes, what Cleveland did was very desperate. They had a glaring hole. Well, not a glaring hole because they had an average quarterback the last 4 years in Baker Mayfield, but they put a value on an elite quarterback, and that value was $230 million guaranteed. Up-and-coming quarterbacks are going to be expecting contracts like that. And I don't know how that is beneficial for a team overall, giving that much money to a quarterback. You need more money to, build a team around that quarterback. And when you're giving somebody $230 million guaranteed, that really hurts that option of, building that team around that quarterback. So I can see, I remember hearing those reports when the contract details came out about Watson. Like, there's going to be a lot of people that are pissed that the Cleveland Browns did that. And yeah, we'll see how it plays out. It's going to be icky for a lot of negotiations going forward.
It's interesting, though, that he brought up that the Ravens don't necessarily have to do that. They don't necessarily, they should, because intuitively it makes sense. Like the market should continue to go up. But I mean,
right.
It seems like the owner is like, yeah, I mean, we'll see. There's nothing really coming from Lamar's camp right now, so we'll just wait it out.
Yeah. I think the Ravens are in that. They're like next in line to pay their franchise quarterback. Cardinals with Murray are probably in that same position. So I think those two teams are kind of like, people are going to wait to see how those contracts play out to see if they, have to match to keep those guys, or did the Cleveland Browns just overpay and these next two quarterbacks, referring to Lamar and Murray, realize like that's like that's not something I should strive for if I want to be on a team that can win.
It almost makes you wonder, like, at what point do you start considering either putting quarterbacks in a separate pot or having like a salary ceiling? You can't have like a hard salary cap ceiling, because if you do, if the league grows, you're just going to run into like labor relations problems later on down the road.
Yeah.
Because less of that money would go to the players and it would go to other things that the owners want to put it towards. But it's like, I don't know, man. It was just interesting that he even considered the fact that, we're just not going to engage. We're just going to give him a number that seems fair, because the trend in the NFL would suggest that that's going in the opposite direction. Like, people are going to be paying quarterbacks upwards of $50 million, maybe within the next 5 to 10 years.
I think the league is going to wait and see what happens with Lamar and Murray to kind of see, is that the new trend? Or did the Browns they're just too desperate and they overpaid? So we'll see how it plays out.
It's possible. I mean, it is. You could look at the individual circumstance and be like, yeah, it's the Browns and they're desperate at this point. I think that definitely has some credence to it. He also had some interesting things to say about Lamar, too. He said he called Jackson's decision to wait, quote, unique as hell, because everybody expects you to say, I've got to get mine now. The kid is so obsessed with winning a Super Bowl that I think deep down he doesn't think he's worthy of the contract. What do you make of that? That seems like that's kind of an out there statement, right? Because the number one thing, like, I mean, he's an NFL MVP. There are quarterbacks who are getting paid a lot more money that haven't had necessarily the accomplishments that Lamar Jackson has had in his career. It's interesting that he would suggest that, like, Lamar doesn't think he deserves a big bag. I mean, the one thing we learned about Lamar is that he wants to be a billionaire and he wants to be a champion, right? So I think it's more of just Lamar wants a set number that isn't smaller than what his contract would entail. He doesn't have an agent to tell him to take a deal right off the table. So he has he's got more outside thought. He's thinking outside the box, I think. But I think it's just an interesting statement by the owner. Like, I think he goes on to say, like, I think he wants that to say, now I deserve to be on top. People can speculate any way they want. I don't think he's turned on by money that much, and he knows it's coming one way or the other. I completely disagree with that. He wants to be a billionaire. Like, he said it.
Yeah,
he's open about, and by doing that, you wait for the franchise tag. You wait for the franchise tag, you get tagged, you do the 5th-year option, get tagged twice, and then see where the market's at in 4 years. And I don't think Lamar's in a hurry, and he doesn't have an agent telling him to do anything different. Do you think he doesn't think he's worthy of a gigantic contract because he hasn't won a Super Bowl yet? That would imply like some serious mental stuff going on with Lamar, like, in the sense that he wants to win a Super Bowl first and then get paid based off of that. When a lot of guys, I think the reverse. They think, I may never win a Super Bowl, so why don't I just get paid as much money as humanly possible now with a long-term deal? Lamar's just in a unique situation because he's got all the leverage, it seems like. They've openly said, hey, this guy is our guy for the future. I don't know, like, it just seems like I don't think the owner is right on that one, where he doesn't care about money. I think Lamar cares about money a lot, and he's trying to maximize it here. But, like, what do you make of that? It just seems different than what we've heard from Lamar himself.
I mean, a lot of people were speculating on this contract extension stuff just because they need to talk about something. And I'm pretty sure the situation is Lamar has had zero contact with the Ravens about an extension. And it's that simple. And the media wants to blow it out of proportion. Like, why haven't the Ravens extended the Ravens? And he doesn't care. It's not on his main goal is winning. And I don't think he's guaranteed $23 million this year. So why worry about anything except for being better and getting better? and working with his he's working with his receivers right now. He's in Florida playing with Bateman. Seeing Instagram posts about that. So he's working. He's getting better at football. And I think not having an agent like blowing smoke up his ass and like pressuring him like, hey man, you saw what Josh Allen did. You need to get your money. Like he doesn't have anybody doing that. And I think that's the way him and his mom, his family wants it. That's why they don't have an agent. He's guaranteed $23 million next year. And his goal, I mean, that's plenty of money for 1 year of playing. And his goal is focusing on getting better and winning a championship. Regarding the $1 billion comment he said to LeBron, like maybe that's his goal later. I mean, the football window is a lot smaller than the entrepreneur window. He might only have 10, 15 years of football in him, but he can earn money until the day he dies. And I think potentially the $1 billion comment was more of a long-term thing. And the championship is more like that's his narrow focus right now. That's his short-term goal. And maybe his thought is if you win a championship, that money is just going to come along with that type of thing, you know? Because outside of football, he's already made money outside of football.
Right.
Outside of his playing contract with the Ravens, he was the Madden cover after his MVP season. I'm sure he got a nice little check from that. He has the Oakley sponsorship. So he has other sources of income. My take is that Biscotti is right in his comments in the fact that Lamar isn't worried about the money at the moment. And the worthy thing, like he doesn't feel worthy enough. I wouldn't know how to speak on that unless I had a relationship with Lamar. So
right, no, definitely.
It doesn't seem too far-fetched that his focus is getting better and winning versus having his mom negotiate with DeCosta right now. I mean, there's a lot that goes into negotiating with the general manager your contract. Maybe his mom doesn't want to deal with that right now. Like, hey son, you have $23 million coming next year. Let's worry about it let's worry about it down the road. Just get better at your craft. Like, I don't know.
I've also think it was one of those things where maybe they looked for an agent early in his career, and an agent just kept telling him switch to wide receiver. You know what I mean? If all these other owners and all these other executives said the same thing about him when he was coming out in the draft, imagine what scouts were telling him. Or imagine what agents were telling him, because agents are the ones who negotiate the deals with these guys. And they can only see it from the owner's perspective and maybe not Lamar's. And I think maybe they thought these guys just want to convert him to wide receiver. Why would we do that? Let's just do it ourselves. We market him as a quarterback and we go from there, right? I think he had to do that early on.
I can see that. And if that was the case, their decision already paid off.
Right.
Because the amount of money he has made from being an MVP quarterback versus playing as an NFL as an NFL wide receiver, it just maybe in their eyes they're like, we're already in the green, we're already playing with house money, so let's just get our championship out of the way and then worry about the money later.
Yeah, and also, I just think that I don't think you would ever hear that. I don't think Zach Taylor would ever say that about Joe Burrow. That Joe Burrow wouldn't think he was worthy enough to get a paycheck. It's such an interesting take. And you're right. I don't have any insight on Lamar Jackson as a person. I base a lot of what I said and the opinions I form off him off the shop, because he's not really talking to NFL people. He's talking to LeBron James. He's talking to marketing executives and that. He's talking to Donald Glover. These are all guys that could help elevate his profile, if he wants to be a billionaire, these are types of people that he wants to show, hey, like I have the chops for stuff outside of football. And I think that's valid. I think and that's why I take so much stock in what he said, because he's not surrounded by football people in that interview. He's surrounded by media moguls and business execs and all this other stuff. He went on to say some other things too, like he doesn't see them signing Jackson to a contract extension before the start of the season. And then he talks about the franchise tag situation. He said, and quote, but it's like Eric DeCosta can't keep calling him and say, hey, Lamar, you really need to get in here and get this thing done. That's not a GM's job, Biscotti said. Kirk Cousins did it that way. What if Lamar says that? I'll play on the 5th year. I'll play on the franchise. I'll play on another franchise, and then you can sign me. And that gives me 3 years to win the Super Bowl, so you can make me a $60 million quarterback, because that's where it will be 4 years from now. Like, Steve Biscotti at least gets it. He's like, yeah, I kind of get what he's doing. Like, he wants to make as much. And that's why there seems to be no concern, because this seems to be a mutual thing between both parties, right? They don't give a fuck if they know he's their guy. He's just trying to make more money. And later on down the road, if he can make $60 million, instead of having the deal restructured through his team, Lamar can just play on the franchise. And like, it would be all good. He'd make more money in the long run. So he would meet both goals there, and he could win a Super Bowl along the way, because that's fucking 3 or 4 years of his career where he's got this. He's basically opened like a second window. The first window of his career was his early career. Now he's sort of transitioning into like starting to get into his prime, really. I mean, he's so young, dude. He's only 25 years old. And he's already talking about $60 million, being a $60 million quarterback 3 years from now. So I think a lot of fans get pissed off about this talk because people are making too much out of the contract stuff. To them, I would say it's still important. It's going to get settled at some point down the road, and you'd like to have those numbers so you can figure out what you can do with the rest of the elements of your team. But it seems like everybody knows what's going on. It's not like Kyler Murray deleting his Instagram account, where it seems like he's disgruntled. It seems like everybody knows what everyone's trying to do. It's cool if he hasn't come to the negotiating table yet.
Yeah, the only people that need to worry about are the Ravens front office and Lamar and his mom.
Exactly.
And we're just along for the ride.
And his mom, by the way, seems like a lioness. Baker Mayfield had some interesting comments because he met Lamar Jackson's mother, and he described her as intimidating. So I don't know. It's Baker Mayfield, right? Like, who knows? She could have said the wrong thing to the guy, and now he's blown it all out of proportion or whatever. But
sure.
I mean, she's in there negotiating contracts with business people. I'm sure she does have a sense of striking when the iron is hot, and she's managed her son, I would say, pretty spectacularly up to this point, given what their goals were. So congrats to them. Obviously, it's going to be interesting to see when the contract comes out. I can't wait to dissect that, because you're right. Between that and Kyler Murray, those are the two that may really progress this narrative of, quarterbacks are just going to get paid more and more and more. Or do the Ravens make a stand and say, all right, enough is enough. We're going to pay what we think is reasonable. I don't think they can do that, personally.
Yeah, it's going to be tough.
Yeah. So yeah, fascinating stuff, man. It's just interesting to hear from the owner every once in a while, because I think he's one of the better owners in the NFL, personally. I don't know how he votes or anything like that. We don't know a whole lot about NFL owners, really. I could name probably 6 off the top of my head. And the other guys, I'm probably not going to find out until we hear some news about them. But they're the ones who really pull the strings, right? They're the ones that Roger Goodell answers to. So it's interesting to hear their thoughts on certain things. All right. So you know how much I love Marquise Brown. There was an article that came out 4 days ago by Jamison Hensley, again, on ESPN, why Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens want to keep Marquise Brown. So you know me, I saw that article and I was like, I would love to hear this and see what they have to say. So here we go. They were talking to Eric DeCosta. And basically the direct quote from Eric DeCosta after he just picked up his 5th year option, $13.4 million. Good job getting paid. Here's what Eric DeCosta had to say. He's a talent. I love his personality and his competitiveness and his passion. Quite honestly, for his skill set, for what he brings to the table, the fifth-year option in my mind, if you look at receivers and what they're making now, it looks like a bargain. I have lots of problems with what he just said. He loves his personality, his competitiveness, and his passion. He doesn't love his route running. He doesn't like his size. He doesn't like his hands. He likes the three qualities that he listed first about this guy is stuff that I could say about a lot of wide receivers in this league. A lot of them. So I don't necessarily know if those are the first three traits that I would want to have thrown out about a wide receiver that you drafted in the first round. So I have a problem with that. Another problem that I have with really doesn't have anything to do with Marquise Brown. I just think it's a bad argument. And that argument is, well, if you look at what receivers are making now, we have a real steal here at $13.4 million, right? It kind of doesn't acknowledge the fact, though, that like guys like Christian Kirk, who we agree is probably a very good number 2 receiver, right? On a team. He could definitely be a contributor to an offense. Don't get me wrong. 4 years, $72 million. And he's making like $18 million a year. It's sort of like what you said about Deshaun Watson in desperation, right? Like you have this quarterback or this organization really where they were desperate to get a starting quarterback. They signed him and everyone thinks that it's overinflated. Some of these wide receiver contracts are the exact same way. You know me, man. I have a humongous problem with Hollywood Brown. And I think it's just rough with him because there are times where I'm just like, man, if there was a guy that could go up and get that ball besides this guy, maybe they should go and get a guy like that on the roster. And we agree that they still need to address the wide receiver position and maybe get another guy in there. I don't know. I just think it's a bad argument. I think it's a bad argument for keeping a guy who is so inconsistent and is so up and down and has been throughout his whole career, really.
Are you saying you disagree with EDC?
Yeah.
Well,
no, I don't. No, okay. Yes. I don't disagree in the sense that I agree that he is getting a bargain. Okay. I agree that $13.4 million is getting a bargain. Right. But I think the way if you look at other receivers in the league, like some of the examples they're throwing out are guys like Devontae Adams, DeAndre Hopkins, these guys who are making, 28 million, 30 million per season, Tyreek Hill, these guys are not Hollywood. These guys are better than Hollywood Brown, dude. That's the reason why you're getting the discount that you're getting. You know what I mean? It's like, does that not, and he's young too. He's just as young as Lamar. And if I make excuses for Lamar being young, maybe I'm willing to make some concessions with his age as well. But I just don't think it's a good argument to say that, and especially with some Ravens fans calling the way Ravens go about free agency. Some people say that we're cheap and that we're not willing to spend on big guys, even though I think the Marcus Williams signing kind of proves that wrong. I don't know, man. Like, what do you think? Do you think that I'm off base with that? I just thought it was a bad argument. That's all.
I get your point with the adjectives. When you're talking about a number 1 receiver, which obviously we've talked about in detail, Marquise Brown is not our number 1 receiver, nor does he have the skill set to be a number 1 receiver. He's more of like a 1B, 2A, like just speed guy, and he fits that role within our offense. He's the speed, vertical threat type guy, and he has a good relationship with Lamar. And I think that is valuable because the man granted, there was an extra game in the season last year, but he was a 1,000-yard receiver. And the contract that Christian Kirk just got, who was also another example of like a 2A, 1B type guy, getting paid $18 million a year. Should we have drafted DK Metcalf, AJ Brown, a ton of other guys over Marquise Brown? Hindsight, probably, yes. But the fact of the matter is his speed is very useful in our offense, and that was the idea. Put a lot of speed around Lamar, and it is what it is at the moment. And he's going to be worth every penny of that 13 mil next year, in my opinion. Being 100, I mean, 1,000-yard receiver for 13 mil, compared to what Christian Kirk is getting next year. Who knows what he's going to have on that team? Probably not that significant amount of yardage, but compared to that contract,
I want to throw out a number real fast to you. And this makes the argument that if maybe Lamar had stayed in the lineup last year, things would have been a little bit different. But in the first 9 weeks, Brown had the 6th most receiving yards in the league at 682, along with 6 touchdown catches. In the final 9 weeks, he managed the 37th most receiving yards, which was 442, and failed to reach the end zone. So he didn't score at all in the back half of the season. Another problem, too, is like sometimes Lamar misses him. Sometimes Hollywood Brown is open, and you think to yourself, like, damn, he should have gotten the ball there because that would have been an easy touchdown. But both guys are extremely young, and I think they're still trying to figure some stuff out. But with Hollywood, it's like the big thing I don't see from him is challenging one-on-one balls, contested. And
that's not his game, Ben.
I know, but they're trying to.
That's not his game.
In this offense, with the limitations that we have at wide receiver, sometimes Lamar Jackson has to force plays. Sometimes he has to make throws to get the offense moving, because our run game last year wasn't spectacular because we had line issues and all of our running backs were injured, right? So Lamar had to make some more riskier throws just to get the ball down the field. And you want a guy to go up and be able to go get those. And I think it's obvious that he's not that caliber of receiver. You're right. It's not his game. It's not. His game is to try and get open and separate from guys and use his speed to do that.
Bless you.
Bless you, Asher. But in a Greg Roman offense, it doesn't seem like they're trying to do that. They're trying to do all these crossing routes, and they never really send him deep. Maybe that is an issue. And I've questioned Greg Roman's play calling before. So I don't like that the first 3 things that he says about this guy is, oh, I love his drive and his personality and his passion. It's like, if that's the only thing that we're getting at with this guy, like, I'd rather have a guy like DK Metcalf where I can look at him and I can be like, did you see him bench like 500 fucking pounds with his shirt off the other day? Did you see him like moss 8 different receivers during the season for the Seahawks? Like, that's the kind of guy I think this offense is missing. We've talked about it before. And it's not maybe as pressing of a need at pass rush, but I just think those statements are kind of taken out of context a little bit. And the Christian Kirk contract is absurd. That's absurd that the Jaguars are willing to do that for this guy. But they've got to do something. I mean, their organization is a dumpster fire. So maybe that's sort of a desperation trade as well. So I just thought that would be fun.
You see what teams are giving out these ridiculous contracts. It happens every year.
Yeah.
You see the teams that set the market. The teams that set the market are desperate, horrible teams most of the time.
Yeah. By the way,
it is what
free agency as a whole has been crazy this year. Matt Ryan's going to the Colts. Yep. Dude, it has been wild.
Trades and the Tariq Hill thing came out of nowhere.
Ooh, yeah, you know what? Crazy. On that, I think that's the Patrick Mahomes contract. I think that they were going to have a hard time paying him once Patrick Mahomes' cap hit gets up to like $70 million or whatever the fuck it is in the next 3 years.
Yeah.
I think you're starting to see the fallout from that. I don't know if other guys are going to leave from that team, but I think there's going to be a very slow exodus because of his contract. Okay, I think that's good, man. Do you have anything else you want to talk about before we say goodbye to the people?
Ravens. We have 10 draft picks. The draft is a month away. That's exciting. I hope we get Bobby Wagner.
I do too. That's going to be the big news of the week, I think, now that things have sort of slowed up. There's still some quarterbacks that need to go some places. I'm sure Baker Mayfield's upset. He won't be able to go to the Colts. But free agency, I think the big frenzy has pretty much died off. And now we're going to start delving into more individual contracts instead of guys just flying all over the place. And it's going to be fun to cover.
Yep.
Chad, it was great seeing you.
Down.
Asher, great talking to you. Milady, I hope that you have a fantastic day. There she is. Hey there. So stylish with the avocado onesie. Forget about
That's
it, dude.
right.
She's ready to go down to the Inner Harbor and strut around, dude.
Holy guacamole.
Thank you so much for all of our subscribers who listen. As always, like, we do this for you. I also wanted to plug a friend of ours. So we had him on as a guest we did a Super Bowl wrap up with him. Our friend is starting a podcast called No Interference, and they're doing some really good stuff. It's an NFL news podcast. Go over. We'll leave a link in the description below. Chad, it was great seeing you. It was great talking to you. And we'll see. We'll probably have a pod next week if the Bobby Wagner stuff goes down or any juicy news or gossip that we hear from all of our trusted sources. So
That's right.
Caw, my friend. It was good talking to you.
Caw.
And the feeling coming from my bones says my dog.